Hi everybody, this is MJ Augustini and welcome to another edition of the Real Estate Transaction. Today our topic is the appraisal process. Besides the inspection process, the appraisal process is the other vital aspect of the real estate transaction. Why is it so important? It's important because it is an integral part of the buyer's financing. The transaction could be in trouble and can easily fall apart if the appraisal price doesn't equal the purchase price. And actually, as of this recording of this video today, we're having an appraisal problem on one of our deals. So hopefully some of the steps that I talk about in this video will help me put my deal back together. So let's discuss it. What's an appraisal? When is it done? And why is it needed? An appraisal is an independent opinion of value based on comparable sales that have occurred usually within the last 90 days near your property, and that it's done for the lender's benefit, although paid for by the buyer. It's supposed to represent the true value of a home, whether it hits the purchase price or not. This protects the lender's equity position and the buyer from overpaying for a property. Remember, if the buyer is putting down 20%, the lender's on the hook for the other 80%. So they're going to have a critical eye on the appraisal. Once the inspections are completed and agreed upon by all parties, the appraisal will be ordered and I'll be notified. How to avoid an appraisal problem? And again, I'm having an appraisal problem today. Price the home correctly from the beginning. Now, this is an appraisal problem on a house I'm selling. These are things that the listing agent needs to know. Number one, I use recent sales of similar homes within a half-mile radius. So you want an idea of what has sold within a half mile that's similar to the subject. I adjust up or down for location, condition, and amenities. I take note of what's happening with supply and demand. Are there a lot more houses than buyers out there, or are there a lot more buyers than houses? So we look at that factor too. We also take note of the current market conditions, such as interest rates. Are interest rates high right now so that demand is low, or are interest rates low so that there's a real big demand? So that's an important factor. If the comparables support the price, there should be no issue with the appraisal. The next thing we need to do is make sure the appraiser is competent. I quiz the appraiser when I get the phone call. I want to make sure he or she is familiar with the area and or style of the home. This is critical, especially for unique or historic homes, which can be particularly challenging, and only an appraiser who has a history of appraising these type of properties should be allowed to do the appraisal. Also, I meet the appraiser in person. You have to meet the appraiser in person. You have to walk through the property, make sure they know all the nuances about the property, make sure they understand what the property is all about. It's vital to the whole integral part of the appraisal. I also give the appraiser town documents, which include the deed, field card, your tax bill, and the plot plan. Those are all documents that I pull when I list your house, so it's really easy for me to gather that information and give to the appraiser. We also give the appraiser a copy of the floor plan. That makes it easier for him or her to write down all the room sizes, because they have to do a room size calculation on the appraisal. If there's any new sales that have happened in the meantime, then I'll let the appraiser know and we can add those to the mix. The next item I give the appraiser is the appraisal information sheet. Not all agents do it, and matter of fact, most agents don't. But this is another vital piece of information that the appraiser is grateful to receive and makes their job easier. It helps to make sure that the value comes in. The critical piece of information on the appraisal sheet talks about what's happened in the transaction. Has there been multiple offers? Have people bid over the asking price? Are there any particular aspects of the house that have drawn people there? What's happening in the marketplace in general? What have the sales been like? Giving them all that extra information helps them be able to make adjustments for your appraisal, because after all, we're working for you, trying to get that price to come in at the purchase price. My knowledge of the local market, as well as knowing all the improvements in your home, will make the difference on whether that house appraises or not. Other critical items that we need to discuss are appraisal writers. Many times when an agent writes up an offer for your home, they're going to use an appraisal writer. Savvy buyer's agents will use these. The appraisal rider is there to protect the buyers in the off chance that the house does not appraise out. Like the house that I'm selling today, we used an appraisal rider, and now we're going to have to negotiate with the seller for the new price. This rider gives the buyer the ability to negotiate. I think we have 3 days to negotiate with the seller to come to some agreement. If we're successful in our negotiations, then the purchase price will be reduced. We'll amend the contract and go on with the transaction. This rider doesn't force you to sell for less money, but it allows the buyer to negotiate and certainly terminate the contract if we can't come to terms. So it's really important that you think about that, because you don't want the house going back on the market and us having to explain why it went back on the market. So the next critical item to discuss are cash sales. We use the appraisal rider for cash sales many times. Don't think you're out of the woods if the buyer is cash. Many buyers will want an independent assessment of the house and will add this to the contract, especially in sellers' markets when they have to compete for the property or overbid for a particular property. The next critical item we have to discuss is the amount of the deposit. If the buyer is putting 20% down and the house doesn't appraise out, the ratio for their mortgage will be affected and they won't be able to be approved for the amount in the contract. If this happens, a negotiation might be started and the buyer can maybe put more money down, the seller can reduce the price, or it could be a combination of both. Everyone tries to negotiate this to come to a happy medium. Many times the buyer, like today, my buyer doesn't have the extra money to go up. So unless that seller comes down on the purchase price to what the house appraised for, my sale could possibly terminate today. So the amount of the deposit can determine whether the appraisal has to be negotiated or not. The next critical item to discuss are VA loans. VA loans must appraise out for the full purchase price, or else the buyer does not have to purchase the house. However, the VA has a unique characteristic to their appraisal process. They have what's called a tidewater report. This allows the seller's agent to refute the appraisal with the bank, and it allows us to add our own comparables and send them in. Many times the appraisal will be changed with this new information, whereas going the traditional method through a conventional loan like my buyer is today, once the appraisal is done, it is a rarity if the appraiser decides to change the appraisal based on new information. They don't get paid enough to start redoing appraisals. Once that appraisal is done and gone, they basically wash their hands of it and they're on to the next appraisal. VA loans do require the seller to sign an amendatory clause, which requires the house to appraise out. So there's no getting around it. That house must appraise out for the full purchase price. The next critical item to talk about are CHFA and FHA loans. By default, these loans must also appraise out for the full purchase price, even if the contract is not subject to an appraisal rider. The seller, being you, have to sign an amendatory clause that states the house must appraise out for the full purchase price. The next critical item to talk about with the appraisal goes back to the unpermitted features in your house. The appraiser is going to carefully examine your home and compare it to the town field card to make sure that they match. If you have an extra kitchen or an extra bathroom or a deck that doesn't show up on the town card, there can be an issue with your appraisal. This is another check and balance to make sure that you, the homeowner, get all the permits that you need for the work that was done in your house. They have been even known to call the town building official and talk to them about it. And then, of course, the nasty letters will be coming from the town hall about you doing work without permits. But that's a whole nother topic, and you can listen to that in my permit video. That is a basic overview of the appraisal process. This process can be worrisome for all the parties involved. However, I don't want you to worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. I look forward to working with you to help you achieve your goals. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me by phone, email, my website, or social media platform. And of course, don't forget to hit that like button if you thought this video was helpful. This is MJ Agostini saying, we'll see you next time.